Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
In this edition of Global Print, I will tell you about how Prime Minister Narendra Modi's foreign policy is undergoing a very interesting sea change. How in this age of China, which is trying to be a global hegemonic power, trying to take Indian territory in Ladakh, trying to bleed the Americans in trade policy, and trying to even damage its good friends, the Russians, how India is seeking new global friends based not on ideology, but on the very simple principle of pragmatism. Now let's see what this word pragmatism means. First of all, of course, it means being practical, realist. But most of all, it means that when India goes out and makes agreements or pacts, it's on the basis of what is best for its national interest. And let me give you a couple of examples of what's happened this week. First of all, we saw how External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar was in Moscow a few days ago on the margins of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, and he met the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and both these leaders discussed a disengagement in Ladakh. The Chinese have been in Ladakh. They have taken Indian territory these last 4.5 months. So a 5-point plan of action was discussed, and both sides have agreed that they will disengage, and we will see the outcome of that hopefully over these next few weeks. But what was interesting about this meeting between Jaishankar and Wang Yi was that it was facilitated by the Russians. On the same day, which is on the 10th of September, in Washington, the Maldivian Defense Minister, Mariya Didi, signed a defense agreement with the Americans in the Maldives, which means that now the Americans will train and fund and have a much closer defense relationship with the Maldives. And naturally, and let me tell you this, the Indians are on board. We know that the Maldivian speaker, Mohammad Nasheed, is going to be in Delhi on the 20th of September, and there is absolutely no way that a US-Maldivian defense agreement can be signed or would have been signed without the Indians being very much part of it. So on the one hand, you have the Russians that are facilitating an India-China dialogue. On the other hand, you have the Americans, which is signing a defense pact with the Maldives, and the Indians are very much on board, albeit informally, behind the scenes, behind the parda, but very much on board. So this pragmatism, where India is not leaning either towards the Americans or towards the Russians, but standing up in its own national interest, is what the new Modi foreign policy is about, I argue, in my column Global Print this week. We also saw in Qatar a few days ago on the 12th of September, which was witness to this historic peace deal between the Afghan government and the Taliban. And we saw how Abdullah, who is the head of the National Reconciliation Council of Afghanistan, he led the Afghan government delegation, met the Taliban, which were thrown out by the Americans in 2001 after the September 11 attacks. So 19 long years after, in which thousands of people have died, the Afghans and the Afghan government and the Taliban came together to begin negotiations on sharing power in Kabul, but also allowing the Americans to exit. Now, all these years, we know that India, for example, has played a very important role since 2001, since the Taliban were evicted by the Americans. India has given about $3 billion of aid, which makes it one of the highest donors besides the Americans and some other NATO countries. But India's Foreign Affairs Minister Jaishankar was not present. He did deliver a video, over video, he delivered a message for these Afghan talks, and India sent a senior diplomat, J.P. Singh, to represent it in these negotiations in Doha, in Qatar. Now, I'm among those who believe that Mr. Jaishankar should have gone to Doha. He did deliver a video address, but if he had been there in person, he would have rubbed shoulders not just with the most powerful Americans like Mike Pompeo, Zalmay Khalilzad, but also the Russians, and most of all, send the message both to the Afghan government as well as to the Taliban that India is a benign power, is here to stay, is here to be very much part of the peace in inner Asia, and that without India that you cannot really have peace. That would have been a great message to give. We also know that Zalmay Khalilzad, the US envoy to Afghanistan, is in Delhi this Tuesday. From Doha, he went to Islamabad and he's now in Delhi. So India, in a sense, coming back to the story in Afghanistan. It has been out for the last couple of years, despite the aid that I talked to you about. But over the last few years, India has been saying again and again that it will not talk to the Taliban. When the Afghan government is talking to the Taliban, India has held back. And a couple of years ago, 2 retired diplomats were sent to talks in Moscow between the Taliban, which were facilitated by the Russians. But these 2 Indian diplomats were instructed very clearly, do not talk to the Taliban. So that shift that has taken place, where you didn't want to have anything to do with the Taliban, you didn't want to get your hands dirty, but you wanted to completely stay away in this very sort of Brahminical position that you wanted to adopt. Today, as Jaishankar has argued in a book that he's written called The India Way, India very much wants to be on the front lines, wants to get its hands dirty, wants to negotiate and be part of this new global order that China is trying to disrupt. So on the one hand, you have India, like I said, using the Russians to facilitate talks with the Chinese. On the other hand, being informally on board with the Americans and the Maldivians, and this a little bit of a shift, which is to be part of the evolving Afghan story. To come back to the Maldivian story, what is interesting is that that Maldives, if you've seen the Maldives on the map, it's a huge archipelago on both sides of the equator. There is the 0-degree channel through which all the ships crossing this part of the world must go. So to have a presence in the Maldives means that you have a presence in the Indian Ocean. So on the one hand, India is very much already part of the Quad countries, which is Australia, Japan, the US and India itself. And that Quad, while it hasn't held any exercises together so far, there have been several bilateral exercises that have taken place. But imagine this Quad, which is on the one hand all the way from Australia and extends its presence, its footprint, right across the Indian Ocean, right up to the Maldives and beyond. So India making new friends and hoping to influence the global story with one idea in its mind: to constrain, to limit China's hegemonic power. At the moment, getting the Chinese out of Ladakh is the top item on Modi's agenda, for which he is willing to make any compromises, whether to deal both with the Russians and the Americans at the same time, all in the name of India's national interest. So please read my column Global Print and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's always live and buzzing.